and welcome back to Turning the Key at SNG. I'm your host Phoebe, and it's great to have you with us again. Before we get started, just a quick reminder of why we're here. This podcast is our space to have open and honest conversations, bringing customers and colleagues together, sharing what's happening across SNG, and making sure your voice is a part of how we move forward. So, whether you've listened to episode 1 or you're joining us for the first time today, you are in the right place. In our last episode, we started from the beginning, looking at how SNG came to be the not-for-profit organisation that it is today. We talked about the locality model and how we're working in communities more directly and more visibly. We looked at the mergers that shaped Sovereign and Network into one organisation and what that means for the homes, neighbourhoods we serve. And we explored our relationship with the government and the role social housing plays in the wider picture. Today, we're going a step further and we're talking about you, more specifically, your voice. This episode is all about a customer's seat at the table, how and why we engage with customers, what meaningful involvement actually looks like, and what it's like to sit alongside senior leaders and influence real decisions. Because customer voice isn't something that sits on the side of our work, it's the golden thread that should run through all of it. And I'm really pleased to be joined by 3 voices who help connect our organisation with our communities. First, we have Princess, a member of our customer influence panel, who helps to represent customers' perspectives at a strategic level across SNG. We're also joined by James, one of our digital engagement specialists, who supports customer engagement both online and across our older person schemes. And finally, Tracy, engagement specialist who works closely with customers across our London and South East localities, helping to build relationships, run events and support thematic groups. So, thank you all for being here. Shall we turn the key and go inside? So lovely to actually have my team join us on the podcast. So hello, everyone.
Hello.
So many voices all at once. My goodness. So to give you a bit of info, our team sits within the Customer Experience Directorate. Our team has 5 team members. We have our manager and we've got our head of service. So we're all based in different locations across our geography, and each member of the team has slightly different priorities, which all aligns to our common goals and priorities for the team. So Tracy, I'm going to come to you first. Can you tell me about your roles and responsibilities within the team?
Yeah, so just a bit of background about myself first, really. I started what was Network Homes 11 years ago. I still work in the London region, which is split into 3 separate regions, and the Hertford and South East region. And currently focus on the thematic groups, like the New Youth Voice Group, the Stigma Action Group, which is a resident-led group who work closely with us to make sure that we have resident and customer insight. We basically cannot assume that we know what residents think and what they want. We need input, so it's really vital, and it is gaining traction and soon to be mystery shopping. So lots going on.
Amazing. So James, you're the digital engagement specialist. Can you tell listeners what that actually means?
Well, digital is a wide area, but at SNG, how we use digital is by giving people that voice online. It's around giving that option, that choice of time and space of when you can do it. So we know that people work, people have other things to do, other priorities. We want to make sure that people can have their say when they want to. Now, we have a digital engagement platform, which is called Engage, and that is everybody's chance to have their say whenever they want to.
So can I just butt in there? What is a digital engagement platform? What does that actually mean?
It's a website that you can register for. We have lots of prizes as well that you can win by doing
incentives,
surveys, polls, online forums, focus groups, and it's a great chance for us to capture that voice of people we don't essentially get to know. The other thing is, I've been here quite a long time.
You have.
I've been here 20 years. I feel like I've been here longer than I've been married. I haven't, because I've been married a lot further. But 20 years service, been through quite a few mergers. But you know what? The reason I'm still here is because actually the difference the engagement service makes is absolutely massive.
And we'll get into that. I think we'll have a chance to talk about that as we carry on chatting. As a team, we have a simple mission, which is building relationships with customers, listening to feedback and suggesting ways to improve services. And again, we will get into how we do this a bit more later. Also, we need to do a special little shout out to Charlotte and Lorna, who are not here today. They are the other 2 specialists that are within our team. So hello, wish you were here. But that's quite a nice segue into fully introducing our other guest today. So this is Princess Fortes, and Princess is a member of the Customer Influence panel. So hello.
Hello.
So it's brilliant to have you with us today. And you've had such a powerful journey as a social housing customer and now as a member of the customer influence panel. Can you take us back to the beginning and what first brought you into the world of customer engagement?
Yeah, hi, Phoebe. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. My journey into the customer engagement happened quite naturally. I'd had a few experiences as a resident, and it made me realise how important it is for people like me to have a voice, not just to raise concerns, but also to help shape services and how services are being delivered. I wanted to be part of something that could make things better, not just for myself, but also for other residents too. And that's what led me to get involved and eventually join the Customer Influence Panel. Prior to joining the Customer Influence Panel, I was the chair of the London panel.
An excellent chair she was as well.
Thank you, Tracy.
Well, she was okay.
It's amazing to see your personal impacts of the involvement over the years. And we've mentioned a few times the Customer Influence Panel. Can you tell the listeners what the group is and its purpose?
Yeah, of course. So the Customer Influence Panel, or we abbreviate it to SIP, it's a group of residents who work with S&G at a strategic level. Our job is to review and influence things like business performance, policy, strategies, and to make sure that the customer perspective is always at the forefront of the decision making. There are 11 of us on the panel. We also have 2 customer board members who take that same insight directly to the board. The aim is to keep the customer's voice right at the centre of everything that the organisation does.
So you're already, as a SIP member, you're already operating at quite a high level with the strategic side of things. And then we've also got our 2 resident board members who they go to, the board meeting is the top meeting in the organisation, isn't it? So it quite literally is all the way to the top, which is quite reassuring. Yeah. One thing I'd like to know, and I think others would also like to know, is what's it like sitting at the table with senior leaders and the exec team and the CEO?
Phoebe, it's empowering.
Oh.
That's a good answer.
That's it. You don't need to elaborate.
No, it can be a bit nerve-wracking at first, because especially if you're not necessarily from that type of background in terms of working at that level, sitting around people who are at a senior level, sometimes you can feel it can be a bit daunting. But then once you realise that your lived experience really matters, the people you're working with actually care about the customers and what they're doing and what's happening, and they actually want to involve and engage us in that decision making, it kind of turns it more into confidence. And they also, what's the word I'm looking for?
Encourage?
Push.
Encourage,
Push.
yeah. Encourage and push.
Yours is a bit more brutal, James.
Push. Always.
But yeah, they kind of encourage you to kind of be open about what you're saying. And when you want to make a point and you see them stop and actually think about what it is you're saying in that moment, you really understand that the customer's perspective and how powerful it is to the decisions that are being made and the changes. And they're all passionate as well. I think as a customer, when you just think about an organisation, you just sometimes with your experiences might not necessarily think people behind the phone, or because you don't have that face-to-face interaction, right? So you think, oh, do they actually really care? You know, they're just in that job for the money, for example, because everyone has to work. However, but when you sit down with them, you realise they actually do care about the job they're doing. They care about the customers, and they want you to be their critical friend. They want you to actually say what isn't working in S&G, and they actively do things to try and change that and make things different.
Princess, can I ask you?
Yes.
Do you feel welcome when you attend the meetings?
100%. 100%. Yeah, I think we get treated like royalty when we come here.
Aw.
Yeah.
Good.
No,
That's
we
nice to
genuinely
hear,
do.
actually.
Yeah, no, I do. And everyone's so welcoming and just always friendly and happy, and genuinely just want to make you feel comfortable enough to be able to give your voice across.
It must be nice, obviously, knowing that your voice is listened to. Do you have any examples of you kind of the impact you've managed to have within the SIP meeting?
Yeah, I think a good example is when we raise concerns about communication works after major repairs, and residents often felt not knowing what was happening next and that lack of communication. And when it was raised at the panel, part of that discussion meant that the process was reviewed and there's now clearer follow-up and communication after jobs are done. So residents or customers, do not feel as though they just make a repair request, for example, somebody comes and then maybe they need a follow-up job and then it's not done. Actually, they look at the whole process and how from beginning to end, customers are actually engaged within that process.
Can you tell me something that people don't realise when you're having these conversations with senior leaders?
No, we're not there to complain, and we're actually there to collaborate. I think once, especially like in the community, once people hear what you're doing, the first thing is, can you get us housing, or can you escalate the kind of complaints or repairs or stuff that they have? Not fully understanding what our actual role is and what we're here to try and do. We are there to give our perspective, not personally, but across the board. So although you might only have one person or two people, for example, representing London, we're not there to represent our own individual views. We're there to represent the whole of that community and put that forward for everyone to try and make a difference.
So it's probably worth mentioning as well, if you have any interest in reading up on what the customer influence meetings are talking about, you can have a look on our website. So I've been privy to a few conversations that have happened at a SIP meeting, and so often I've thought to myself, I really wish other customers could hear this. There are some genuinely fascinating topics and discussions that come from these meetings, and there's nothing better than a senior leader realising a customer's perspective right in front of you in the room. But I'd like to know, what surprised you most when you first sat at the table?
There was a lot of training that went in. I think how much actually goes on behind the scenes. I think from a customer's perspective, you just see your housing provider and you think that's it. But housing is so complex. And we talk about things like compliance, finance, community engagement, and there's so many different parts of housing that actually move and collaborate together. I was also pleasantly surprised how much senior leaders actually want to hear from us. They ask questions, they listen, and they also talk about how the panel potentially needs to change as well to make sure we are actually ensuring that we're making a difference and we're improving services. They take feedback on board and they want the panel to be productive in a space where we can actually make change.
So you've mentioned a little bit as well, but I kind of want to bring it to the forefront that some would say being involved with one of our resident panels or being an engaged resident can give you access to shortcut your repairs. What would you say to that?
No. I wish it did, but that's not how it works. If my boiler breaks down or I've got some issue in the home, I have to go through the same process as everybody else. Even if I do know lovely people like the ones who are here today, they can't help.
I mean, I've had it as well, and I think this also kind of links to the stigma conversation as well. When I had moved into my house, and the first thing I got asked was, "Oh, you got a house because you work for SNG?" And I was too stunned to answer. I mean, I was like, no, not quite. I mean, I wish it was that easy. Like, that would be great, but obviously not. That's not the way. There genuinely are no shortcuts behind the scenes, which we can confirm now.
Yeah, 100%.
For our next segment, we want to take a moment to talk about why customer involvement in social housing truly matters and why it must never be treated as a tick box exercise. On the 14th of June in 2017, we were all devastated to learn about the Grenfell Tower fire, a tragedy that shook the nation and exposed deep-rooted issues in housing, safety and accountability. It became a turning point for how resident voices needed to be valued and how organisations respond to those they serve. That moment in 2017 marked a shift, not just in public awareness, but in how housing providers began to rethink their relationships with residents. It sparked a movement towards transparency, accountability, and genuine collaboration. And it's voices like yours, Princess, that have helped shape that change from inside out. So let's rewind a little bit. Princess, do you remember where you were when you found out about the fire?
Yes, I do. I was living in London at the time. I remember waking up to the news that morning and it was extremely heartbreaking and devastating. It just wasn't the tragedy itself. It was knowing about the fact that residents had raised complaints and concerns for so many years and weren't heard and nothing was being done about it. They weren't being listened to. And it really stuck with me and it made me very determined to do whatever I can to make sure residents' voices are never ignored again. And that's why part of the reason also why I've joined a panel like this for S&G. I'm also a qualified social worker as well. So at the time, that borough was under a lot of pressure because of all the things that come after that in terms of people needing help and support and resources. So I was actually deployed down as a local borough to where the Grenfell was, to go and help residents in terms of what they were experiencing and the aftermath of that. So not only personally, but also professionally as well, it was something that impacted us in social work, because housing's not just isolated, it's all different organisations working together.
Yeah, the ripples it caused, the magnitude of it is honestly crazy. Tracy, you were also living in London at the time and also working for Network?
Yeah, I was actually in the contact centre still on the phones. And I don't think any of us or anyone who had a role across the country could ever forget just how the call volumes just shot up. Obviously completely understandable. People were scared, people living in large buildings. You could hear the stress in people. The number of people trying to get through at one time, it was insane. It was horrible. You never, ever want anything like this to happen. It's an absolute nightmare and so tragic. And it should never have happened. And just to go back to what Princess said, what you said a minute ago, Princess, about, the fact that concerns have been raised umpteenth times, nothing ever picked up on. It's just, there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for it. We're talking about human life. We all woke up to the news that morning, didn't we? We all saw it on the early morning news. And you think, oh, God, what am I seeing? It's almost like a 9/11 effect. You remember where you were when you found out.
Yeah. James, you've worked in housing for a very long time, as we've already mentioned, like a whole 100 years.
I have.
How did you notice the shift after Grenfell?
It was enormous, to be honest with you. Everybody in the social housing sector was worried, was concerned, whether it be a tenant, employee, shared owner, leaseholder, colleague, contractor. Ultimately, a light had been shone on everybody, and it needed to have change, and change needed to happen quickly.
Yeah, and when we were kind of talking about the podcast before recording it now, we realised that your job title changed a month after Grenfell.
Yeah, it was quite strange, really. I was a resident engagement officer, and about a month later was changed to customer scrutiny officer, which was ultimately a direct change because of Grenfell.
So over a year after the tragedy, in August 2018, the Green Paper was published. This is a consultation document from the government, and it sets out problems, options, and it starts to invite views. But it doesn't represent a settled policy. It kind of identifies what needs fixing, not just physically, but culturally. And the paper lays out 5 core themes. Princess, do you know what these are?
Yes, so ensuring homes are safe and decent, effective resolution of complaints, empowering residents and strengthening the regulator, tackling stigma and celebrating thriving communities, expanding supply and supporting home ownership.
Yeah, so it was the first formal document post-Grenfell, so almost like a first official response from our government. And it explicitly ties social housing safety, resident empowerment and regulatory reform all together. So over 2 years later, in November 2020, the government published the white paper that followed from the consultation. So it sets out the government's committed policy direction, moving from listening and diagnosing in the green paper to proposing concrete change. James, can you tell me about the purpose of the white paper?
Of course, yeah. The core purpose was to rebalance the relationship between residents and landlords. And it was to set out the actions the government will take to ensure that residents in social housing, 4 things really, are safe, are listened to, live in good quality homes, and have access to redress when things go wrong. So making sure that if it does go wrong, action is taken.
You know what? In episode 1, Ellie and I were just saying, it's so simple. It is so simple. And look what this absolute tragedy has resulted in. Something really simple that could have been in place before.
It's not rocket science,
No.
And ultimately the green paper asked what's going wrong. The white paper was actually answering, this is how we're going to fix it. And it's one of those requirements in a strategy for how we'll engage with residents in tall buildings. And it's massive. It's a huge shift change, and one I think we've embraced it at S&G. I think we really have, because we have quite a lot of taller buildings. And I think it's just a really good way, from our point of view, of involving residents in what we do.
Yeah. So bringing this forward to the present day, the white paper didn't just set out principles, it changed expectations of every housing provider in the country. It signalled that the sector needed to move from compliance to culture, listening better, acting faster, being more transparent and placing residents at the centre of how decisions are made, a bit like you were saying earlier, Princess. So for organisations like Network and Sovereign, we found our own responses. And since the merger, we've been bringing these new ways of working together. Tracy, when you think back to that period after the white paper, what did you feel were the biggest shifts that the organisation needed to make?
I think it was the fact that residents do just need to be listened to, or customers, if you like.
So essentially the difference pre and post was we were listening before, now we have to.
We have to.
And now the regulators
would as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we are held to account on it. Rightly so.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, customers, they need to be listened to. That's all there is to it. It really is that black and white, it's quite cut and dry.
So with our merger and becoming one organisation, Princess, can you tell us a little bit about what's been going on recently with SNG and building safety?
Yes. So there's been a particular focus on making sure residents in high-rise buildings understand the new safety requirements. And to support this, there's been in-person engagement events. These events have given residents the chance to speak directly with building safety and fire safety specialists. During these conversations, the team has listened to concerns, took away actions. These have included repairs, ASB welfare concerns and issues with things like lifts. They've spoken directly with residents through those visits, and all those conversations have been logged, monitored and followed up. The next round of engagement events is now being planned as part of this ongoing work, and there is work currently underway to create a building safety thematic group.
Yeah.
So this will bring together S&G customers of all tenures to keep residents' voice central to building safety decisions.
So what Grenfell laid bare was the real hurt that happens when decisions about people's homes are made without the people who live in them. And it reminded all of us that far too often regulation follows tragedy rather than preventing it. We can't change what happened, but we can change how we work now. So we've already spoken about SIP, which is the customer influence panel, but there are other ways to get involved. We try to make sure that there are enough different methods that suits individuals. James, can you tell us about our other resident panel?
Yeah, sure. We have our scrutiny panel, acronymed, in inverted commas, to SP, strangely. And the aim of the SP, #scrutiny panel, is to carry out dedicated reviews of SNG services, as requested by the Customer Influence Panel, the SIP. So the SP is supported by a wider pool of customers. Ultimately, they're called scrutineers. So what they do is carry out ad hoc scrutiny reviews, activities like job shadowing, focus groups, speaking to other residents as well, finding out what's going on, really getting under the skin of what their service is being received like. So ultimately, results in making recommendations are based on business improvements. Then finally, the outcomes of each scrutiny are presented to the S&G board to agree how to implement the suggested changes. There's that golden thread.
Yeah, right through. And we mentioned the board earlier, and it's important to remember that they're the top dogs. They're the ones making the big decisions. So it's good to know that this is reaching board, which is really reassuring. Tracy, you've been taking the lead on some of our new thematic groups. You've already plugged one of them, but do continue to do more. Could you tell us about the groups?
Yeah, so we want to ensure that engagement is flexible for everybody, really. So obviously we have the Customer Influence Panel, we have the Scrutiny Panel, but we have groups that are more flexible, thematic groups, so different themes, really. So obviously, I'm going to say again, we've got the stigma and social housing one. Yeah, I know I sound a bit obsessed, don't I?
Maybe you can tell your world.
It's resident-led, and it's a group of currently 6 residents who we meet monthly, and they're there to keep us on track to make sure that our action plan has their voice at the heart.
Princess, we've been travelling around our localities for our road shows over the last year, so can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so throughout the year, we've been popping up in each of our localities for a roadshow. There's opportunities to get colleagues and customers together to talk about issues in their communities, things such like grounds maintenance, the ASB officers, employment and skills, and the new contractors in any other department. James, what's your views on it?
Well, what we do is some sort of targeted, don't really like using that word targeted, but it's ultimately what it is, community consultations. So it's in areas where we really need to target most. Here's that word, target again.
Target.
It's around if there's low satisfaction or there's high amount of repairs being reported, or vice versa, where there's high satisfaction and even like low amount of repairs. And it's just making sure we get into those communities and work closely with the locality officers, that used to be housing officers, who invite us to help facilitate real meaningful conversations. It's whether it's focused on specific estate issues, blocks of flats, or any other local area.
And then, of course, we've got our podcast, which kind of does what it says on the tin. I don't think we need to talk about that too much. But, this is something that we hope becomes a regular space where these voices and experiences and questions can keep shaping how SNG work. But this is the chance for you guys to listen and hear what's going on behind the scenes. Blockers. Right, so inevitably we have blockers along the way, quite a lot of them, a lot of the time. And we have to get quite creative to kind of reaching our end goal sometimes. We're a bit of a unique team and we don't really operate like any other team within the business. So yeah, we do have to get creative. So Tracy, what are some blockers that you've come across?
For me, I think it's the sheer size of the organisation that we are now and the stretch of the geography that people's homes are in.
James, what about you?
So digital-wise is where I'm coming from. So there's a real lack of digital confidence, especially with the older generation, in inverted commas. So our Housing for Older People schemes, we're designing tea and tech style chats where we can really, really encourage people to take part in a digital way. That's not scary. I mean, ultimately, a lot of people feel really hesitant about using digital and online methods. But the way the world is now, applying for benefits or having your wages paid in is all around digital methods. So, and Housing for Older People really do struggle with making sure that they can have their voice. And actually, I'm going to be going into schemes. I'm going to be making that point that actually it's not scary at all. I might be scary, but digital is not.
Yeah, you are.
Heard it here first. He is terrifying. You guys listening can't even see him. He's so scary. So SNG has a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a YouTube account. But on Facebook, we don't usually encourage comments, which people might have noticed on our posts, because the reason for this is because of the volume of unnecessary contact that then creates for our advisor in the contact centre. Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that there is a place for Facebook comments. But if you're trying to report a repair in our comments, not a lot we can do about it publicly.
Yes, we do need to do security checks, and they are incredibly frustrating, incredibly boring. But actually, with anyone, before they can book a repair, update their details or discuss their situation, we ask people to private message us on Facebook instead. And we'll only ever ask for personal details to be sent via a secure channel. And you wouldn't want your repair request, let's call it that, sat on a Facebook
for everyone to
see.
We're not trying to stop people from commenting their views. We do want to hear them. Being a big organisation, there just needs to be certain routes in which we do that.
Yeah, 100%. I understand why it has to happen, and it can get tricky to manage and things can easily get lost or misinterpreted. But I also think it shows how much customers want to be heard. I think the challenge for SNG is finding the right space for those conversations.
Yeah.
There's great platforms like Engage, James. At our road shows, where feedback can actually be picked up and acted on. I'd love to see a culture where every resident feels confident that their voice really matters, whether that's online, in person, or even through a quick poll on their phone. So engagement shouldn't feel like an advert. It should feel like a natural part of how we all live and work together.
Yeah, the reality is that we want to have these two-way conversations, but the routes in which we can do that, they are limited, is the world that we live in. Like I've said, we're a big organisation and there needs to be specific routes which customers can take to report their repair or to speak to someone. Otherwise, it quite simply just doesn't work. Very quickly, though, if there were no blockers, no restrictions, what would your blue sky thinking be for engagement? I'll come to you first, James.
I mean, engagement, we do have lots of different methods, but What we do struggle with is a younger generation in terms of them having their voice. We're trying to get people involved on our youth voice group. They are our future residents, or actually are our residents that are going to have a long journey with us, and we want to make sure they are heard as well.
Too right.
I feel like busting out some Whitney Houston. I believe the children are the future.
Please don't sing, Tracy.
I wouldn't put it on you.
James and Tracy have spent far too much time together in the last 24 hours, by the way. They've turned into an old married couple. It's wonderful. Great to observe, but for a bit. Anyway, what would your blue sky thinking be?
Oh, it all comes down to money, doesn't it, really? Unlimited amounts of money where we can possibly have more colleagues in the team. We can do more focused, localised, in-person events more regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice.
That's nice. And what about you, Princess?
Just having someone available when you need them and not having those issues with access where you may go through a call centre and you can't get someone specifically. You might have your named locality person, but what if they're not available? Who else can you speak to? And just probably having a little bit more open discussions, I think, would be good.
So we'd be silly not to mention some of the upcoming opportunities that we have to engage with us. So Lorna, our colleague who sadly couldn't be with us today, she's not dead or anything, like she's just not here. I heard how that sounded.
She's in the office, so she's fine. Lorna's
Lorna, are you
fine.
there?
Lorna's alive.
Calling Lorna.
We're currently holding hands trying to channel Lorna, and she's about to walk in. So Lorna is setting up office roadshows. So basically the team's going to be setting up shop in our offices, speaking to colleagues around how they engage with their customers. As well as that, Lorna is also running engagement training to colleagues, basically to understand the ins and outs of why we engage, a bit like today's podcast, I suppose. And the reason for mentioning that now is since the merger, we've got a new policy in place for colleagues to be offered volunteering hours throughout the year. Thank you, Network, for bringing that in, because we didn't have that former sovereign.
You're welcome.
On behalf of Network.
On behalf of Network, yeah.
So obviously, colleagues can, use their hours however they choose. It's a personal preference, but we did want to offer an option where colleagues can come out to our roadshows and to our consultations and to door knocks, and whenever we are physically within a locality, especially if they're in a role that doesn't usually face customers, so we want to kind of offer that as well. And just to let you know, we advertise all of our customer events on our socials and our website, so you can stay up to date.
And on Engage.
Oh, I knew that was coming.
Engage.sng.org.uk.
So that's where we're going to wrap up today's episode of Turning the Key at SNG. A huge thank you to all of my guests, Tracy, James and Princess, for sharing your experiences, your honesty and your insight into what it really means for customers to have a seat at the table. And I hope you like our table that you've been with today.
Love it.
It's quite a nice table, isn't it? Yeah.
Sturdy.
As tables go, it's not bad.
Very white.
And thank you all to listening. These conversations only matter if they connect back to you and your homes, your communities, your experiences. So we'd really love to hear your thoughts. What resonated today? What questions do you have? What would you like to hear more about? So head over to our webpage or Engage, which is listed below. You can share your feedback or get involved in customer engagement in lots of ways, through our roadshows, thematic groups, resident panels, or simply by logging on to Engage, our online engagement platform. The amount of plugs Engage has had is a little bit crazy.
You can never have too many plugs, Phoebe.
I think there's a housing pun there somewhere.
Sorry. Yeah.
Next time, I'm going to be handing over the microphone to one of our customers, Nicola. So Nicola will be stepping in as a guest host, and she'll be leading a conversation all about sustainability and retrofit improvements to our existing homes. So what it means for our homes, our bills, our future and our planet. We're really excited for you to hear what she has to say and to hear directly from a customer leading the conversation. A customer's seat at the table in action. But before we go, we are ending each episode with something new. We're inviting our resident guests to ask a question forward for the next resident on the podcast, kind of like passing the mic from one resident voice to another. So before we close, Princess, what's the question you'd like to ask Nicola, our next host?
So Nicola, since you'll be leading the next conversation on sustainability and retrofit, it would be good to know what's one simple thing you think every resident can do to make their home a little bit more environmentally friendly.
There we go. That will do it.
Good luck, Nicola.
And with that, thank you again for joining us. We are going to lock up and turn the key. Take care, and we'll speak soon.